Very good morning. Good morning to each and every one of you this morning, Margaret Street Church of Christ, this Sunday morning in our study of Jeremiah. So glad to have you with us this beautiful day. If you want to open your Bibles to Jeremiah chapter 37, that's where we'll be. Jeremiah chapter 37. We've been continuing this study now for the last couple of quarters, and as we have on here, I had where, let's see here. Can we, is there anything in the drop box? Should be one that I think says, 37 through 39. See if there's one that says that. There we go. How did I get there so quick? You're so fast. All right. Oops. So in chapter, that's fine, we'll just leave it there. If you see the other one, let me know, because there's some maps and stuff on it that I'd like to show. And if not, no problem. Should be in the drop box for today's date, and then say 37 through 39. So in this particular section, we are in the second half of the book. We've been using this outline that goes up to chapter 33. And we started now in chapter 34 and forward, which is the second half of the book. And these are experiences that Jeremiah is going through. And there's some very important things that are happening in these chapters. And primarily is the fall of Jerusalem, the destruction of Jerusalem. This is whenever King Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon has come into the area, and he has besieged the city. Is that the one? All right. So just by clarification, we did get a little bit behind, but I rescheduled or reshuffled the numbers, and so we're right on track according to my new schedule. So as we often say, there's a timeline that goes through. This jumps around a little bit, but now we're up into 37. We're in Zedekiah, and by remembrance also, your timeline there, we are at the very end, 586. This is whenever Zedekiah is in control, or he is the king, I should say, not really in control. And Nebuchadnezzar has come into the land, and he has sieged the city, and he will destroy the city. So these are the last few years of Jerusalem and Zedekiah's end. This is during the fall, chapters 37 through 39. Some things that happen during this time. Now, the reason I wanted to show you these maps is I want you to understand what's going on regionally before we get into the text. This is Israel under the reign of Solomon. Solomon in that pink area. So you had Saul, then David, and Solomon, and each one built the kingdom bigger. So this is Israel during the time of King Solomon and how big the kingdom had become. All the way up north to Damascus and all the way south, way down south, even unto the Red Sea down there. So they had a large area. Then, once Solomon died and Rehoboam ascended the throne, and Jeroboam was made king, they split the kingdom. What was this one kingdom is now two separate kingdoms. 10 of the tribes to the north, 2 to the south. One's called Israel, the other one's called Judah. So that's why when you hear Judah over and over and over in Jeremiah, it's because Israel had already been carried away by the Assyrians. So what you're seeing there, that pinkish, purplish area, you can't see any color on that one though. What part that says Israel, that's gone. The only thing is the part down there where it says Judah. That's the only vestige left of the country or the nation of Israel that had been developed by those kings. And Zedekiah is the last king in what will be the last vestiges of Israel. Israel no longer exists after Zedekiah, after the fall of Jerusalem, and Zedekiah is deposed. Israel's never a kingdom again. Even to this day, even though there's a nation called Israel, it's not the same thing that was set up by God and what God allowed through all of his promises and all of his providence. And so now what you have is this kingdom that has developed, the Babylonian Empire. This is, for the first time in world history, one of the largest world powers. So this is what predates or comes before the Medo-Persian Empire. You see that to the right there in the green color. They wind up being the second largest power, and they overtake the Babylonian Empire and all the way down to Egypt, as you can see there. Egypt and that entire area. And then after that, that spreads even further to the east, and you have, back to the west, you have the Greek Empire. Alexander the Great conquers even bigger area, and then even bigger to the west and east when the Roman Empire comes along. So this is the beginning of the prophecies that Daniel said would happen whenever he told King Nebuchadnezzar that there would be these four kingdoms, and in the days of these kings, that being the Roman Empire, according to history, was whenever Jesus would set up his kingdom. But I want you to see the little red circle there. That is where Israel was, the nation of Israel. They're just a tiny speck, just a tiny little speck in the middle of this vast empire that Nebuchadnezzar is now in command of. So he has a lot of army at his disposal. Little bitty Israel has no chance. Well, they do have a chance, but what would that chance be? God. And that really is the whole story. That's what we're going to see right here. None of these problems would happen if they would just trust in God. And this is important because Israel is kind of a land bridge and part of what's called the Fertile Crescent. These world powers are vying all the time for power, and so they're always passing. They got to go through Israel. And so Israel is a key place. God put them there on purpose, so that he could show his mighty power. But if you're not obedient, he's not going to do that. So whenever you think of the destruction of Jerusalem, this is the Jerusalem that was built by David and Solomon and built up, and this beautiful city. Not the Jerusalem that Jesus would know, because that Jerusalem was rebuilt by Nehemiah and then later by King Herod and others. And it's not the Jerusalem that we know today, because that Jerusalem of Jesus' time was destroyed. So you got to keep all these things in mind whenever you're thinking about the history that we're going to read here. So when they destroy the city of Jerusalem in Nebuchadnezzar's time, this artist's depiction of carrying all these people away, the remnant of who remained alive, said that millions of people were killed. And this is fascinating, is that they're in Jerusalem, and we walked right by this area where it used to be a parking lot, and they've since dug all this out, and they're finding all kinds of things. Well, one of the things that they find wherever they dig is right on this one layer, whichever direction they go, there's a layer of ash, a thick layer of ash. And then they found other things like just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of Babylonian arrowheads that are bronze, and then even those bronze earrings and stuff that all are right there in that ash level. And I love stuff like that because it just confirms all the things that the Bible says, and it's just fascinating. So keep that in mind as we read in Jeremiah what's happening. So Jeremiah chapter 37, right in the middle, there's all these interactions is what you're going to see in chapters 37 through 39. There's these interactions between Jeremiah and the king Zedekiah and his noblemen, and there's all these different things that happen in the interactions, and they're not pleasant. All right, here we go. Then King Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, reigned instead of Coniah, the son of Jehoiakim, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, made king in the land of Judah. That's an important point. How did he become king? Nebuchadnezzar put him there. So Nebuchadnezzar's already in control. You remember the timeline. There was the Babylonians came, and then they deported a bunch of people, and then they come back now. And the reason that they're coming back now is because Zedekiah is not doing what he's supposed to be doing. He was put there by Nebuchadnezzar, and he's not doing the things that Nebuchadnezzar wants him to do. In fact, he's thinking about going to Egypt to get some help, and you'll see that here. But neither he nor his servants, verse 2, nor the people of the land gave heed to the words of the Lord which he spoke by the prophet Jeremiah. That right there, go ahead and circle that verse. That's the root cause of the problem right there. Right? That's the root cause. Before we go any further, it gives us an indication of what the real problem is. Because if they would just heed the word of the Lord, they wouldn't have these problems. And so that's a very important verse. All right, so the king has a request, verse 3. And Zedekiah the king sent Jehukal the son of Shelemiah and Zephaniah the son of Maaseiah the priest to the prophet Jeremiah, saying, Pray now to the Lord our God for us. Okay, immediately I think verse 2 says they don't heed the word of the Lord. They don't listen to anything the prophet says. They're not obeying God, and yet they're sending somebody to ask them to pray. Pray to God for us. Now, isn't that very much like human nature? You know, so many people, you know, they believe in God. They even respect God, but they don't really obey His voice, you know, throughout the week, the way they live their lives. Until when? When does God become important all of a sudden? When you get in trouble. Isn't that right, Glenn? Boy, when we get in trouble, oh Lord, get me out of this. Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, right? And so that's exactly the attitude that we see right here. It's in desperation that they're asking for help. Now Jeremiah was coming and going among the people, for they had not yet put him in prison. Then Pharaoh's army came up from Egypt, when the Chaldeans who were besieging Jerusalem heard news of them, and they departed from Jerusalem. All right. Sorry, y'all. I think everybody can relate to the allergies. Okay, we're all on the same page. And I mowed the lawn and was working in the yard all weekend, so I'm paying for it now. Okay. So the Pharaoh's army, this is Pharaoh Hophra. And Jeremiah is reaching out. If you go to Ezekiel chapter 17, you can see a lot of the backstory. And that's another thing you need to keep in mind is during this time, remember, Nebuchadnezzar has already carried many people off, people like Daniel and all his friends, and Ezekiel. And so up in Babylon, over in the capital, you have two of God's prophets. You have Ezekiel and Daniel. Daniel is inside the royal palace area. He's interacting with the king and stuff. And Ezekiel is out with the people who've been carried off and ministering to them. But they're both prophesying and telling these things are happening. So you can put all three of those at the same time and refer back and forth to them. So right here when he talks about Hophra, or the Pharaoh coming up, Ezekiel gives more information on that in Ezekiel chapter 17. What had happened is Zedekiah knows he's in trouble with Nebuchadnezzar. He's not been submitting to Nebuchadnezzar, so he's now saying, hey, you know, king of Egypt, can you come give me a hand? So here comes the king of Egypt. So therefore, the Babylonians hear about this army marching upon Jerusalem, so they pull away and they go to meet that army. All right, so when you read this, don't think that they're scared and they're running. No, they're thinking, oh, great, now we got to go deal with this problem. So they start heading towards Egypt. And the word, verse 6, and the word of the Lord came to the prophet Jeremiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, thus you shall say to the king of Judah, who sent you to me to inquire of me, Behold, Pharaoh's army, which has come up to help you, will return to Egypt, to their own land, and the Chaldeans shall come back and fight against this city, and take it and burn it with fire. Thus says the Lord, do not deceive yourselves, saying the Chaldeans will surely depart from us, for they will not depart. So what had happened, if I can put all this in context, is the Chaldeans have this siege around the city. Now a siege is a blockade. And they build walls and they have armies all the way around the city, and they prevent anything from coming in and out. And the whole purpose is the army just sits out there and just waits. until the people inside run out of water and food and everything else, which is exactly what's going to happen. You'll see in another chapter or so. Well, meanwhile, as you hear this army's coming up, they leave all that to go fight the army of Egypt. So Jerusalem and King Zedekiah goes, oh, look here, things are good. So go ask the prophet to pray to God for us, that he's going to deliver us. And the word comes back, don't think that this is over. They're coming back. In fact, you called for help from Egypt. Remember, I referred to Ezekiel. He's going to go back to Egypt. And that is exactly what happened. Pharaoh Hophra, who was coming up, did not engage. Once he saw what he was up against, he turned right around and went right back to Egypt. All right? So verse 10. For though you had defeated the whole army of Chaldeans who fight against you, and there remained only wounded men among them, they would rise up every man in his tent and burn the city with fire. What he's saying there is God's will is going to be done. This city is going to be destroyed. And even if you were to fight the Chaldeans where nothing but wounded men were left, they're still going to beat you. They're still going to win. All right? So, verse 11. And it happened when the army of the Chaldeans left the siege of Jerusalem for fear of Pharaoh's army, not that they were running, they were going to them, that Jeremiah went out of Jerusalem to go into the land of Benjamin to claim his property among the people. So while the Babylonians have gone to take care of this threat, that's what they mean by fear of them, they're going to take care of the threat, everything's clear. And remember what I said a siege does? It keeps anything from coming in or out of the city. Well, there's nobody there, so Jeremiah takes the opportunity to leave the city to go up to Benjamin to inspect the property that he had purchased. Y'all remember that? Do you remember that story? We read that just, I think it was last week, right? Going back, chapter 32. If you don't remember, go back to chapter 32. And verse 32, verse 6 and 7. Verse 7, Behold, Hanamel, the son of Shalom, your uncle, will come to you, saying, Buy my field, which is in Anathoth, for the right of redemption is yours. And remember that story, that was a living parable. That passage, that was a living parable. It was showing the folly. This is part of Israel. Israel's already fallen to the Babylonians. We don't even own Israel. It's why would you buy property in a place that doesn't belong to us anymore? All right, so that's where we are with this. And the whole purpose was to show that there will be people living there once again. That was the purpose of that parable. But here, now he has the opportunity to go see that piece of property. So you see how everything stays connected. It's all the same story. So he goes up there to see that property, and it says to claim his property there among the people. There are still people living in that area that's been conquered by the Babylonians. They're still Jewish people, Samaritan type people that are living there. It's not like it's all Babylonians anymore. So perhaps some of his family, because remember Jeremiah's from Anathoth, some of his family were wanting some clarification or figuring out how this is going to work, or the inheritance and things like that. So he goes up to see the property and to perhaps have a family meeting or something to work all this out. That's where we pick up the story, verse 13. And when he was in the gate of Benjamin, a captain of the guard was there, whose name was Erijah, the son of Shelemiah, the son of Hananiah. And he sees Jeremiah the prophet, saying, You are defecting to the Chaldeans. Then Jeremiah said, It is false. I am not defecting to the Chaldeans. But he did not listen to him. So Erijah seized Jeremiah and brought him to the princes. Therefore the princes were angry with Jeremiah, and they struck him and put him in prison in the house of Jonathan the scribe, for they had made that a prison. All right. What's happening here is you got to think about it from both sides. Remember I said this is about interactions that Jeremiah has with all these different people. He has been telling the king, and he's been telling everybody else what? What's the basic message about Jerusalem that Jeremiah has been preaching and prophesying for years? It's It's going to be destroyed. You're going to destroy this city. Y'all, it's futile. All the things that you're doing are futile. Unless you obey the voice of God, this city is going to be destroyed by the Chaldeans. Now, on top of that, another thing he's been saying, and you'll see that come out here in just a moment, he's also saying, in fact, if you want to spare your own life, if you want to live, you'd be better off just surrendering to the Babylonians. Now, let's stop right there for a second. Let's say somebody, a preacher, I'm not a prophet, but let's just say and put ourselves in these shoes of Jeremiah, and let's say that here I come all the time saying, y'all, America is going to be defeated. You're wasting your time. America's going to be defeated in no time. God is going to take this nation down. And your best bet is to surrender. It's just to go ahead and surrender. Let's say the Chinese. I keep using them, right? China is going to conquer this country. And it's going to happen. You might as well just go ahead and surrender to the Chinese. How would y'all look at me? What would you consider me? It starts with a T and ends with raider, right? Traitor. He's a traitor. And that's exactly what he's saying right here. You are defecting to the Chaldeans. You're a traitor. You've been preaching this message. You've been teaching this message. So this isn't something that's just out of the blue. Now, notice Jeremiah says, it is false. I am not doing that. Now, he's not going to defect. He's not going to go over. But that's not how people see it. They then take him to the princes, and what do the princes do to him? They beat the man. They beat the man and then throw him in prison. Now this is about 15 years after you go back in chapter 36 verse 17, verse 19. Then the princes said to Baruch, go and hide you and Jeremiah and let no one know where you are. Because they knew the king was going to be mad whenever he read the words of Jeremiah. So there were these princes, these people who were concerned about Jeremiah and Baruch. Now here about 15 years later we get to this passage and you got these men who have no respect for a man of God, who have no desire to hear God's word, and they beat the man. And they strike him, and they immediately have no sympathy for him. There's no proof or justice. They just immediately beat the man and throw him in prison. So this is important to see the changes that are happening. And think about it. When your city is surrounded by armies, and then they leave, and then they're coming back, and you got this man saying you're going to be defeated, and you might as well defect, and just all kinds of chaos and stuff that's going on. There's a lot of emotions and thoughts and concepts and ideologies, I'm sure, that are in play. And so these different interactions that Jeremiah is having here, now he's being met with hostility. Verse 16, when Jeremiah entered the dungeon and the cells, and Jeremiah had remained there many days, then Zedekiah the king sent to him and took him out. The king asked him secretly in his house and said, is there any word from the Lord? And Jeremiah said, there is. Now, I find this interesting. The king comes, he hears about Jeremiah being put in this prison. He then pulls him out, and he wants to ask him a question in secret. Why do you think that is? Why do you think he's asking him in secret? He's the king. Any thoughts? What? He knows Jeremiah has the answers. That's one part of the answer. That's correct. He knows Jeremiah has the answers. And then why is he asking him in secret? Think about Nehemiah. What did Nehemiah recognize about Jesus? He knew, as John just said, he had the answers. But Nehemiah came in secret. Why? He didn't want to be found out. What?
Still afraid of the people.
Afraid of the people. There it is. You're going to see that when we get here in chapter 38. He's afraid of the people. All right, so he brings him out. He goes, is there any word? And I love Jeremiah. Oh, there is. There is. Continuing. You shall be delivered into the hand of the king of Babylon. You think that's what the king wanted to hear? I don't think the king wanted to hear that, did he? Now, it's obvious that he comes to Jeremiah. This is a question of fear. The man is in fear. And so he comes trying to see if there's any change, if there's anything different. But the message hasn't changed. It's still the same message. Jerusalem's going to be destroyed. You're going to be carried off if you don't submit to God. Moreover, Jeremiah said to the king, what offense have I committed against you, against your servants, against this people that you have put me in prison? I mean, in Jeremiah's eyes, he's done nothing wrong. He's just a faithful servant. He doesn't even think about or see that this could be considered being a traitor, right? That this is treacherous. Where now are your prophets who prophesied to you, saying the king of Babylon will not come against you, against this land? I love it. He pulls out. He told them this many years ago. Whenever they would bring in the prophets and the prophets would say whatever it is the king wanted to hear, he's saying, where are they now? You know, my word has come true. Look outside. There's the king of Babylon. Where's all your prophets who said this wouldn't happen? In other words, who's the true prophet, king? So he continues, therefore please hear now, O Lord the king, please let my petition be accepted before you, and do not make me return to the house of Jonathan the scribe, lest I die there. Then Zedekiah the king commanded that they should commit Jeremiah to the court of the prison, and that they should give him daily piece of bread from the baker's street until all the bread in the city was gone. Thus Jeremiah remained in the court of the prison. A couple interesting things right there. So Zedekiah does still have enough power to overrule these princes who threw him in this prison. He says, put him in the court and give him bread until when? Until it's all gone. What does that tell us about the siege? You can't be bringing in wheat and things like that to make bread. So there's only going to be so much bread. So until the bread, they already see the writing on the wall. So until the bread is gone, bring him a piece of bread. All right, continues. Some more interactions. First, there's that interaction with those people and the king, and now here's another interaction. Now, Shephatiah, the son of Mattan, Gedaliah, the son of Pashur, Jukal, the son of Shelemiah, and Pashur, the son of Malchiah, heard the words that Jeremiah had spoken to all the people, saying, thus says the Lord, he who remains in this city shall die by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence. But he who goes over to the Chaldeans shall live. His life shall be as a price to him, and he shall live. Thus says the Lord, this city shall surely be given into the hand of the king of Babylon's army, which shall take it. So there it is. That's what I was telling you just a minute ago. These 3 verses, that's the message that Jeremiah has been saying. That's why he's considered a traitor. That's the hard reality. It's very controversial, wouldn't you say? It'd be controversial if what I was saying was true. If there really was, the Chinese, let's say, that were at the door, and I'm saying all that, it'd be controversial, and people would be very upset with me. So we can see why people would be upset with Jeremiah. It's very controversial. You're telling me that I'm supposed to give myself over to the enemy? And Jeremiah saying, yes, if you want to live, do it. And now we get to see just how controversial it is and how the people felt about that message. Verse 4. Therefore the princes said to the king, please let this man be put to death. For thus he weakens the hands of the men of war who remain in the city and the hands of all the people by speaking such words to them. For this man does not seek the welfare of his people, but their harm. Wow. Interesting, isn't it? Kind of an ironic message. But think about it from their point of view. What is Jeremiah to the military forces? Bad for morale, right? I mean, what general do you know goes out to his forces saying, y'all, let's go fight, but you might as well give up because we're going to lose? No general says that, right? No commander says that. And so he's bad for morale. You don't want somebody over here saying, y'all are wasting your time. God's going to give this city into the hands of the Babylonians. That's bad for morale. Not to mention the fact that he's going around telling all the people too. So what does that do for their morale? And it's interesting that they say, this is what's so ironic, this man does not seek the welfare of this people, but their harm. Is that true? It's ironic, isn't it? Because really, they're the ones that aren't looking out for the welfare of the people. If they would just obey and submit to God, then they would be looking out for the welfare of the people. Jeremiah actually does care about the people. He's telling them what's best for them. Does that make sense? Are y'all understanding? Okay. Any comments? All right. Then Zedekiah the king said, "Look, he is in your hand, for the king can do nothing against you." All right, there's the problem. So the people, these princes, these noblemen, come before Zedekiah the king and say, "Let this man be put to death because he's bad for morale." And Zedekiah has no backbone. He has no real power. He's kind of like those Pharisees and the others in Jesus' time. They were afraid of who? The people. So here's Zedekiah saying, "He's in your hand. The king can't do anything about it." That shows you the real attitude of Zedekiah. So they took Jeremiah and cast him into the dungeon of Malchiah, the king's son, which was in the court of the prison, and they let Jeremiah down with ropes, and in the dungeon there was no water but mire, so Jeremiah sank in the mire. Now this is important because the description here is of a cistern. There's not a whole lot of rain in Israel, but when there is rain, they get plenty of it at the short amount of time during the year they get rain. So they build, there's a lot of rocky ground, so they build cisterns. And they look kind of like a big teardrop. They have a very narrow entrance, and that's to keep any contaminants and everything from getting in the water, getting down into the water and contaminating it. And then it's very deep, and that's where they would store their water until the next rainy season. And we saw lots and lots of these cisterns, and some of them are huge. Some of them are as big as this room that some of the Romans built. But most houses and a lot of the different things have these big giant cisterns. And that's why they had to let him down in ropes. And that, notice they said there's no water in it. This is an old cistern that apparently wasn't good or of use anymore. So the bottom of it is full of just silt and mud and mire. And it's big. When we were in Israel, we went down into one of these that would be considered a cistern. It's a big old giant square looking thing. And up above it, there was a little hole. Since over the years, they had built stairs going down into it, but we went down there and we sang. And so we're way down. I mean, the ceiling was probably not quite as high as this, but close. So you can imagine him being put down in there. And notice that these princes are hypocritical. They want to put this man to death, but they don't want the blood of a prophet on their hands. So they're just going to let him die a slow death. Put him down in a cistern where there's no water, there's no food or anything. He's going to sink down in the mud and he's just going to starve to death. It's pretty cruel, isn't it? And so here he is, down in this dungeon, this cistern. Seems pretty hopeless, doesn't it? Well, thank the Lord that there are other servants who God sends into our lives, and we see that in verse 7. Now Ebed-Melech, the Ethiopian, one of the eunuchs, who was in the king's house, heard that they had put Jeremiah in the dungeon. When the king was sitting in the gate of Benjamin, Ebed-Melech went out of the king's house and spoke to the king. Now, interesting, Ebed-Melech literally means servant to the king. That's an interesting name. My lord the king, these men have done evil in all that they have done to Jeremiah the prophet, whom they have cast into the dungeon, and he is likely to die from hunger in the place where he is, for there is no more bread in the city. What does that tell you about the siege? Where now this is sometime later, right? And the bread's gone. So the siege has been lasting. We'll see in a little bit. It lasted 18 months. And so here it is towards the end of the siege. There's no more bread. So there's no more bread in the city. Then the king commanded Ebed-Melech, the Ethiopian, saying, take from here 30 men with you and lift Jeremiah the prophet out of the dungeon before he dies. Now, I've worked in places where you've had to use lines and stuff like that in high places and stuff. And I can tell you, it doesn't take 30 men to lift one person up. It takes 2 to 3 men, 4, 5 max if you really make it easy. Why would he need 30 men? Say again? That's a good thought. There's another reason.
They anticipated trouble.
There you go.
That many guys, the other court officials are just going to, okay.
Exactly. That's why. The king is basically making sure that there's numbers for guard. Because remember what the king's problem is? He says, he's in your hands. I can't do anything. So at least with sending 30 men there, representative of the king, those princes and stuff, they're not going to do anything. So they're more like guards. All right? So he takes 30 men and with him and went to the house of the king under the treasury and took from there old clothes and old rags and let them down by ropes into the dungeon to Jeremiah. Then Ebed-Melech the Ethiopian said to Jeremiah, put these old clothes and rags under your armpits under the ropes. And Jeremiah did so. So they pulled Jeremiah up with ropes and lifted him out of the dungeon. And Jeremiah remained in the court of the prison. So it shows the kindness of Ebed there by taking something, because the ropes would have maybe cut into his arms. So he made him comfortable. He came to his aid and he helped him and he was concerned. He shows that compassion. Then Zedekiah the king sent and had Jeremiah the prophet brought to him at the third entrance of the house of the Lord. And the king said to Jeremiah, I will ask you something. Hide nothing from me. Now that's interesting. I don't think Jeremiah's hid anything from him yet, but he says that. Jeremiah said to Zedekiah, if I declare it to you, will you not surely put me to death? And if I give you counsel, will you not listen to me? Zedekiah, we've been down this road before. We've been down this road before. You don't listen to me. And then second of all, now that these things have happened to me, are you not just going to put me to death? You let those men take me before. All right. Zedekiah the king swore secretly to Jeremiah, as the Lord lives, who made our very souls, I will not put you to death, nor will I give you into the hand of these men who seek your life. Interesting. A man who will not listen to the Lord's voice turns around and swears by God that I'll take care of you. Then Jeremiah said to Zedekiah, thus says the Lord God of hosts, the God of Israel. Basically, you have two choices, Zedekiah. Here's the message. Number one, if you surely surrender to the king of Babylon's princes, then your soul shall live. This city shall not be burned with fire, and you and your house shall live. Or, here's number two, but if you do not surrender to the king of Babylon's princes, then this city shall be given to the hand of the Chaldeans, and they shall burn it with fire, and you shall not escape from their hand. And Zedekiah the king said to Jeremiah, I am afraid of the Jews who have defected to the Chaldeans, lest they deliver me into their hand, and they abuse me. And Jeremiah said, they shall not deliver you. I love this verse. This is highlighted in my Bible. Please obey the voice of the Lord which I speak to you, so it shall be well with you, and your soul shall live. Y'all, that's the whole message right there. That's the whole book of any prophet. Please obey the voice of the Lord, which I speak to you, so it shall be well with you, and your soul shall live. Zedekiah, all of this is dependent upon your obedience to God. If you would just obey God, if your people would just obey God, there wouldn't be any problems. God is the Almighty. There is nothing too small for God. Even that massive Babylonian force that is outside your city walls, God can take care of. He's done it before. You remember the Assyrians? You remember Gideon? Do you remember all those judges that defeated all those armies? Isn't that a beautiful message? But it shows human nature. Zedekiah was more concerned about his own personal things than he was about the people of Israel or even listening to God. So Jeremiah continues, but if you refuse to surrender, this is the word that the Lord has shown me. Now behold, all the women who are left in the king of Judah's house shall be surrendered to the king of Babylon's princes. Those women shall say, your close friends have set upon you and prevailed against you. Your feet have sunk in the mire, and they have turned away again. So they shall surrender all your wives and children to the Chaldeans. You shall not escape from their hand, but shall be taken by the hand of the king of Babylon, and you shall cause this city to be burned with fire. Then Zedekiah said to Jeremiah, let no one know of these words, and you shall not die. But if the princes hear that I've talked to you, and they come to you and say to you, declare to us now what have said the king, and also what the king said to you, do not hide it from us, and we will not put you to death. Then you shall say to them, I presented my request before the king, that he would not make me return to Jonathan's house to die there. And then it happened exactly the way the king said it would, and Jeremiah said that. Now Jeremiah remained in the court of the prison until the day that Jerusalem was taken. And he was there when Jerusalem was taken. So the king comes, and this is basically the message of the folly of trying to contravene God's will. You are not going to do anything to stop God's will. Zedekiah, you're in a position to obey, and you're not obeying. All you have to do is listen to the voice of God, and everything will be fine. But the warning didn't seem to have any effect on the king, because then he says, all right, whenever those princes come to you, tell them the truth. Just don't tell them the whole truth. Don't tell them everything that we talked about. And Jeremiah did that. All right, so now chapter 39, real quick. We got a couple of minutes. The 9th year of Zedekiah, the king of Judah, in the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and all of his army came against Jerusalem and besieged it. That's what we've been talking about. All right? That was in the 9th year. In the 11th year of Zedekiah, in the 4th month of the 9th day of the month, the city was penetrated. It happened exactly like God said it would. 18 months. Whew, could you imagine being surrounded by an army, living in a city where there's water's running out, food is running out, and really when you get into some of the other things we'll see in Lamentations and other places, people were eating, they turned to cannibalism and all kinds of terrible things that were happening. And so the princes of the king of Babylon came in and sat in the middle gate, Nergal-Sharezer, Samgar-Nebo, Sarsakim, Rabsaris, Nergal-Sharezer, Rabmag, and the rest of the princes and the king of Babylon. This would be the equivalent. When they came in and sat down in the gates would be the equivalent of an invading army walking in and sitting down in the Oval Office. What are they saying? We're in charge now. That's a show of authority. It's over. This is now our city. So it was when Zedekiah the king of Judah and all the men of war saw them, they fled and went out of the city by night by way of the king's garden and the gate between the two walls, and he went out by way of the plain. So apparently there was a hidden passageway, a tunnel or something that got them past the siege mounds and everything and out, heading down towards Jericho. But the Chaldean army pursued them and overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho, which is a considerable ways away, not too far. And when they captured him, they brought him to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to Riblah in the land of Hamath, where he pronounced judgment on him. Multiple times, Jeremiah said to Zedekiah, you shall see the king of Babylon face to face. And here it is. It has come true. Then the king of Babylon killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes in Riblah. The king of Babylon also killed the nobles of Judah. Moreover, he put out Zedekiah's eyes and bound him with bronze fetters to carry him off to Babylon. And the Chaldeans burned the king's house and the houses of the people with fire and broke down the walls of Jerusalem. Then Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carried away captive to Babylon the remnant of the people who remained in the city and those who defected to him and the rest of the people who remained. But Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, left in the land Judah the poor people who had nothing and gave them vineyards at the same time. Now we go back to that ash layer and then that destruction right there. So it's over. Exactly what Jeremiah said would happen. So what about Jeremiah? Well, real quickly, I want to summarize verse 11 through 14. Nebuchadnezzar knew about Jeremiah. So he sends one of his captains back and says, take Jeremiah out and send him off to this person's house. And Jeremiah left unscathed and dwelt among the people. God took care of his faithful servant. He made sure that Jeremiah would escape harm. He took care of him and put him in a safe place. Meanwhile, what happened to Zedekiah? Exactly what Jeremiah said would happen to him. The very thing that he said would happen. And it's interesting, notice he said that they killed those nobles of Judah, the very men who scoffed at Jeremiah, the very men who put him in that prison were put to death by Nebuchadnezzar. One last part of the story, verse 15 through 18 of chapter 39. You remember that hero Ebed-Melech? Well, God took care of him too. Here is this Ethiopian, a heathen, working in the king's house. And because he was compassionate and kind and obeyed the Lord's voice, God took care of him too and gave him safe passage as well. Terrible, terrible time, and it's at this point that Jeremiah begins to write the book of Lamentations. We still have several chapters to go because there's a lot of other things that happen in Jeremiah's interactions, but this morning, getting to these chapters, these interactions that Jeremiah had between the king and the princes and everything that's happening, and then the king of Babylon, there's a lot of chaos happening there, but an interesting part of history. So I hope this has been informative for you, helped you to understand Jeremiah a little bit better. And it's now time to take a break and prepare for our worship service.